Hello, everyone. To those just tuning in, welcome. To those who've been checking out sessions throughout the day, welcome back. We hope you're enjoying the content and looking forward to more awesome presentations coming up. A big thank you to our partners and speakers for helping us deliver a fantastic program. A quick reminder to join our Slack channel to interact with other attendees and join selected speakers for Q&A. You can find the link in the menu at the top of this page. Happy viewing.
Hey there, my name's Robbie, and what I wanted to talk about today was how to ship product features that deliver business results. As a product manager, it's really important that you reliably ship high quality product that customers love, but the reality is that's not enough. You can't just ship things. We actually need to ship the most important things, and that's where it gets a little difficult. Ben Horowitz, who founded Andreessen Horowitz, a famous venture capital firm, and was CEO of a number of businesses, framed it this way. He said that good PMs think in terms of delivering superior value to the marketplace and achieving market share and revenue goals. One of our co-founders here at Intercom put it even more succinctly, which was that every piece of product work needs a revenue hypothesis. It's great, it makes sense. But how? How do we do that? That's what I want to talk about today. So quickly, a little bit about me. I'm a product-led, growth-focused product manager for a range of B2B software as a service businesses. I'm currently at Intercom. I've spent some time at SurveyMonkey and also Zynga. And what I'm sharing is some of the techniques and frameworks that I've found helpful over my time at these businesses. And what I want to cover today is first, let's understand the relationship about how product actually does drive business impact. We'll look at the two types of project because there's two patterns that really commonly occur across a range of businesses. And then I'll get into some tips for really how to successfully deliver each type of project. So first up, the product impact framework. When I talk about the product impact framework, what I'm talking about is the way that we ship product and how that actually drives business outcomes. And it's really important to understand how we drive outcomes so we're able to better deliver those outcomes. It all begins with a feature. The first thing we do is we'll ship a product feature. That then comes into contact with customers. And if it's a good feature, it's going to solve a meaningful problem for customers. When a feature solves a meaningful problem for customers, it's going to induce them to change their behavior. They'll behave differently in some way, shape, or form. And that'll generally be observable for a digital product. You'll see them behaving differently in their product. And for certain behaviors, different behaviors can lead to business results. All business result changes are based on changing customer behavior. They're more likely to retain, they're more engaged, they use a particular feature they choose to upgrade. This is always true. So every feature that we ship has an impact in this particular way. We've got to build the feature, solve a problem, change behavior, and then in some cases we get business results. This relationship is really important to understand as we go through. Let's look at a quick example really practically to illustrate this of Instagram. Let's go back to 2016 when Instagram introduced a stories feature. This was pioneered by Snapchat with a lot of success, and Instagram wanted to add something similar. How can we understand Instagram stories from the point of view of the product impact framework? Well, the product feature that they shipped was the stories feature. The problem that it solved was that customers wanted to share light content that maybe wasn't worthy of the full Instagram feed, but they still wanted to get out there. So as a result of being able to solve this problem, what we saw is that customers used the product more. This was essentially a new use case for Instagram. And so as a result, the behavior they will have seen is more sharing and more views. So more content was out there and more content was seen. And of course, the way that Instagram monetizes is through advertising. So more views result in selling more ads, which drives their business results. So you can see as we go through this, the chain, the way that the stories feature solves this problem of wanting to share light content, and it leads to an observable behavior of more sharing and more views, and that's what allows them to sell more ads. That's the chain of relationship. And this is pretty much true across all products and every time we ship something. So let's talk about the two different sorts of project. You can Start from anywhere in the product impact framework. Sometimes you're going to want with a particular business result. Sometimes there's a behavior that you want to change, engagement or retention, something like that. Maybe there's a problem that you want to solve, that customers really want a particular thing. Or it could be that you have an idea for a feature. It's totally fine to start anywhere. And in practice, product managers do start from everywhere in the framework. But what I've found is that, and what we've found at Intercom, is that each end of that framework requires like a quite different approach. And so there's sort of two categories. The first is this idea of a feature first project. So maybe it's an idea you have for a product feature or a particular customer problem that you want to solve. Typically the hard part for those projects is getting further down. What's the behavior it's going to drive and how's this going to have business impact? And so we can talk specifically about feature first projects and some of the ways that we can make them more effective. The other type of feature or project is an outcome first project. And so this is where there's a particular behavior that you want to drive. Maybe it's engagement, maybe retention, or there's a particular business result you want to drive. How do we make more revenue? How do we drive more money? Outcome first projects, typically it's very clear what you want to achieve, but it can be a little bit harder to determine what do we actually need to do in order to make this happen. And the product impact framework can really help you to step through and make really good guesses as we go through each of those. So what I want to do now is talk a little bit about some tips. So how can you drive results for feature first projects? A really common fail case for a feature first project is to skip the whole customer problem step. You've got a great idea for a feature and then you're sure that's just going to drive behavior. Let's introduce this particular thing. And avoiding that is one of the ways that you can build product that's going to drive better results. Paul Adams, who's my boss, put it really well. Great PMs don't spend their time on solutions. One of the things that Intercom as a company is really big on is really getting clear on the customer problem that we're solving. And there's a link in the slide there to Paul's blog post where he talks about how to define problems. Getting really clear on the problem allows you to really understand what is that customers want to do and build a better solution. And it's always a well-framed problem will make sense to you. If you understand your customers, you'll understand why they have that problem and why they want to fix it. And it won't just be framed as we need to build X. So really trying to get clear on the problem is one way that you can guarantee success or improve your chances of success if you've got a feature first project. You want to deeply understand that customer problem. And it's something which it's almost hard to invest too much time in up front. It can seem like there's a lot of, it can seem very abstract. Some of your stakeholders may say, oh, it's obvious why we want to do this particular feature. But generally you're going to get, you're going to get much better design outcomes, and it's going to be much easier to define how you are going to be successful, what are the success metrics that you're going to want, the behavior that you want to see, and the business results, if you're able to really crisply define what is the problem that shipping this feature would solve for our customers. Another fail case for feature first projects is skipping measuring impact. So sometimes, even if you have defined the customer problem, we'll say we've got the feature, we know what problem it solves, and we might measure some customer behavior. Maybe, hey, some people have used this thing, and then we declare success, job done. And we can get better than this. And if you want to drive impact in your business, it's really important that you find a way to measure. Now, measuring isn't super easy. And so I'd love to talk about some examples here. This one is a situation from Intercom. And so Intercom is a product that allows businesses to talk to their customers, often for customer support, for sales, or for customer engagement. And as part of the product, we have an inbox. An inbox is where an agent or people from a particular company can see all the conversations and create and manage conversations with their customers. It's kind of like an inbox. And so the feature that we shipped here is this idea of apps in inbox. So on this right-hand rail of the inbox, you can see highlighted here, there's some information from Stripe. So the big feature here was what you're able to do is easily import and set up custom views of information about your customers. That makes it much easier to have a conversation with them. So you know more information and can define in a really custom way the information about that customer, so you're able to have a better conversation. How does that shake out in the product impact framework? So The feature that we want to ship there is this custom sidebar, which allows you to integrate with tools such as Stripe and Salesforce. But what's the problem that that's solving? Fundamentally, the problem that it's solving is that switching between different tools is inefficient and painful for support agents. The behavior then, if we were successful in solving this problem that we would see, is we would reduce average reply time. If we've removed the inefficiency and the pain in switching between tools, we'd see that the time it takes on average to respond to a conversation should go down. And so that's a way that we can measure success for this product or for this particular feature. And then the business result that we'd expect to see if average reply time goes down is improved retention for support customers. Sounds good, right? This is actually another trap. So it's all too common to have a chain of logic that goes like that. We'll ship the feature, users love it, retention improves. Retention is notoriously hard to measure and to find impact from. As an example, here's Gibson Biddle, who was the chief product officer at Netflix. Using retention as a metric for all projects is just not feasible. It's a hard metric to move, and proving a retention improvement requires large-scale A/B tests. And this is a guy at Netflix. Netflix has 158 million subscribers, and what I think, looking at the number of zeros, is 60 squillion hours of content annually. That is huge scale. And so if he's saying that it's very, very hard to measure changes in retention, most products which don't have that kind of worldwide FANG level scale, what chance do we have of measuring with retention? So what do we do? Well, one approach is to develop a spreadsheet. What we're going to do is we're going to model out and assume a certain level of retention and kind of what's the ARPA of those customers and this whole sort of process. That's certainly the direction that like a BizOps team may go, or a product manager with a quantitative or financial services background might try to go. The problem with this is that it's all guesses. Don't go down this path. Don't try to measure right to retention, because as a famous man once said, there are lies, damned lies, in Excel models. Modeling isn't a bad thing inherently, but what underlies it is a huge amount of assumptions. And in actual fact, a lot of those assumptions are the exact thing that we're trying to prove. We're trying to see how much we can measure retention, but we measure success by just assuming that there's a certain level, a certain change in retention. That doesn't work, it's circular. So what can we do instead? The secret is to use proxy metrics to track impact. So we sort of split the difference. We're not saying just look at people that have used the feature, and it's also probably going to be impossible to measure a change in retention. But what you can do is look at a customer behavior that we know historically really closely ties to retention. And then doing that well is also a little tricky. So a proxy metric is a customer behavior metric. It's got to be something the customer does that are associated with. Historically, we've seen that they associate with. And so in this case, we're going to use them to stand in for the business metric that we care about. So something like subscription retention, a business metric like that. But the benefit with the proxy metric is they're often faster and easier to measure. So we lose some accuracy and precision in return for speed and ease and practicality to use with this. A really good proxy metric is an observable behavior, so something that you can see in your product and through your analytics team, that shows that the customer solved their particular problem. That's the way that we come up building these proxy metrics. So here's an example from SurveyMonkey. I looked at SurveyMonkey at one point. The business result was that for a particular project might be that we want to improve retention for new SurveyMonkey users. If you're coming to SurveyMonkey, how do we show that we improve retention for new customers? Well, retention is really hard to measure, but there may be some things down the line that we can measure on the way. The way that we would come about figuring out a proxy metric is to identify the problem that we're going to solve. What's the problem that SurveyMonkey solves? Well, SurveyMonkey pretty much offers customers online surveys, and the way to frame that problem is that customers want a quantifiable way to know what other people think about something. That's what a survey does for you. How would we know if a customer has solved that problem? Well, the behavior that we looked at in SurveyMonkey was getting 5 responses to a survey. If you'd sent a survey and got 5 responses, then it's reasonable to assume, hey, yeah, you've fulfilled that way that people know about something. Something that's really interesting in this 5 survey responses idea is there's a mixture of quant and qual in coming up with this estimate. So the idea of getting responses to a survey, the only reason we picked that particular behavior is based on the customer problem. If you're coming to SurveyMonkey, you've got to get responses to a survey. If you're not doing that, then you're not really using the product for what it's intended. But how to choose 5 survey responses, that's actually an empirical question where we work with data scientists to identify, well, typically we know that a lot of customers will test a survey with themselves ahead of time. And it seems like about 5 survey responses is the point at which it's a real survey and it's been meaningful and useful. Obviously, sending a survey to one person is overkill. It's not particularly useful. You could just send an email. You need some kind of scale. And so to quantify, to determine the number for your particular metrics, it's some sort of art. There will be some guesswork. But the important point is to choose the metric based on quantitative things. The metric should reflect customers solving the problem. So figure out the metric or the behavior that you want to choose based on an understanding of your customer problem, but then choose the level of that particular metric working with your data science team. But a new proxy metric is always going to be a guess. It's really important to trust, but also to go back and verify. One of the classic things that can happen with proxy metrics is that the more that you try and move them, all of a sudden you can break the relationship with the underlying business metric. So this is if you don't select the proxy metric right, or even sometimes if you do, it's really hard to move under. It can often be very hard to move underlying business metrics. And so if you're using a proxy, it's really important to continually verify that your proxy is in fact continuing to be associated with changes in your the core business metric that you care about. It's hard work. It can often take 6 or more months of analysis and validation. If it feels difficult and complicated, that's because it is. But trust me, it's worth it. You're always going to be happy that you were able to identify this metric, which was a rock solid predictor of business impact and also allows your team to work faster. So that's a bunch of stuff on feature first projects. What about if we swap to the other side of the product impact framework? How do you drive results for outcome first projects? Outcome first projects, just to refresh, are the kinds of projects that start with a customer behavior you want to drive. Often that's retention or engagement or something like that. Or maybe it's a business result that you want, subscription retention or more revenue or something along those lines. Typically, this will be kind of a growth type, or it's often referred to as a growth product problem. And so growth teams will typically be trying to drive behaviors, whereas core product teams may be spending more time in customer problems. Actually, to be effective, both of these teams need to really work through the full product impact framework. But starting with an outcome first project has its own sort of set of challenges that we'll go into. Let's use another Intercom example. So Intercom, a very, very problem first, customer first company. And a couple of years ago, we said to a team, please improve seat expansion. Seats are one of the ways that customers pay for Intercom. And so in some ways it was saying, let's improve expansion. Let's get more customers buying Intercom. The response from the team was pretty much visible confusion. This is not something that we were used to working with. And this is actually quite common when teams try to move into this outcome first problem work because it's very unusual. A feature first project is something that we're very familiar with, but this is an outcome first project. And so we've got to behave a little differently. A common fail case for outcome first projects is that we go straight from the business result to the product feature and we skip identifying the customer behavior that we want and we skip identifying the problem that we want to solve. This happens all the time, and avoiding this is really the big secret to success in outcome first projects. What do I mean by this? What happened with this particular seat expansion project is we said, well, we want to get people to buy more seats. And so let's redesign the flow that allows customers to add seats. What we did is we completely skipped the piece in the middle. We weren't clear on what the problem was or what the behavior that we needed to drive in order to get more customers to buy seats. And so as an idea, this is an okay one, but how do we know if it's going to be effective? We really don't know if it's going to be effective. And this is a common problem for outcome first projects. The way that we can avoid this and actually become really clear on, or give ourselves a much better shot of success with outcome first projects, is to really clearly identify the customer problem that drives the behavior that we want, that's related to the business outcome that we want. What do I mean here? So in this particular case, the team wanted to improve seat expansion, which is an outcome, and the idea, the product feature they were talking about was redesigning the ad seat flow. We can sort of fill in the gaps here a little bit. So what might the behavior that we're trying to drive? Well, in this case, it seems like we were trying to drive more customers to click add seat. And I'm guessing if we wanted to redesign the add seat flow, presumably the problem was that there's all these users that want to add seats, but can't actually use the flow for usability problems. That would have to be the problem if we were going to redesign that flow. What we can now do is go and validate some of these assumptions. We can think amongst ourselves, do we think it's reasonable that there's customers that want to actually add seats but just aren't able to? We can look at our support tickets. We can talk to customers. We can really try and validate in any way we want to understand, is this a real problem? Do we think that this is the problem that's driving this particular issue? And that typically is the hardest part with outcome first projects. We know the behavior we want, or we know the result that we want, but the tricky part is finding the problem that's leading to, for customers to behave in the way that we don't want, and the problem that, if solved, would induce customers to behave the way that we do want them to behave. What's really helpful about laying out the chain of logic in this way is it allows us to more clearly examine our assumptions and to validate assumptions. Doesn't mean we always have to validate them. Sometimes we might go on instinct, but at least we're being really clear about what we are assuming is happening and the behavior that we would see as a result. If we don't get the results we expected, we're better able to iterate. So an alternative way to do this, that was the way that we, or that the team did that particular project. If we'd actually followed this process through, we may have gotten to a bit of a different result. So let's say we wanted to improve seat expansion. How might we do that? Well, one of the things that we see is customers that use Intercom for support typically have more seats because you need a fair number of people to do customer support. And what's the reason that customers aren't using us for support? Well, Intercom doesn't currently handle voice support. If you have a live customer support room, Intercom can't handle that. Well, that's a clear problem. And so maybe the feature we want to ship is build a voice support product. You can see here that there's a really nice chain of logic through this whole process. We're pretty sure we'll improve seat expansion if we grow the number of support customers. We know that they tend to have more seats. And also, we also know really clearly that voice support's an issue. A range of companies have a voice support. And so we'd have fairly high confidence that if we built a voice support product, we would actually improve our seat expansion. And I contrast that with our previous example where the idea that customers were trying to add extra seats but weren't able to, it's kind of spurious. There wasn't a whole lot of evidence for that. And so working logically through each of the steps in the product impact framework allows us and gives us a much better shot at building product that's really going to solve the problem that we want to solve. A final tip for outcome first projects is to use the right tools at each particular stage. It's easy to get mixed up into quant and qual and research and analytics. And I think looking at the product impact framework allows us to identify at each step what we should be doing. So if we're trying to identify the customer behaviors that impact particular business results, well, that's a data analysis task. You'll be working with your data team and or your finance team to identify insights such as support customers are more likely to have more seats. So if you want to figure out the behavior you need to drive for a particular business result, that's an analysis problem. If you're trying to identify the problems that stand in the way of customers behaving in a particular way, that's a research challenge. So if we want to understand why don't more customers use us for support, well, we should go and do user research. That's what we need to do. If we want to define and determine the product feature that we should ship to solve a particular problem, that's product design. And each of these steps have an appropriate time and place. And this is why we often see in a product team, we'll have data scientists, researchers, and designers. Each of them have a particular job to do, and you're going to need to employ each of these particular skills to step back through each step in the product impact framework. So How do you ship product features that deliver business results? 3 quick tips. First, it's really important to identify the type of project that you're working on. Is it a feature-first project or is it an outcome-first project? Knowing which of those it is makes it much easier to identify the really common fail cases for each of them. For both an outcome first or a feature first project, you're really going to want to understand the problem that you're solving and clearly define the problem you're solving and the customer behavior you want to drive. Lay out that logic, and that allows you to choose to either validate each of the steps in the product impact framework more clearly, or you can go on hypothesis. Either way, the process of laying out that logic clearly will help your designers design better solutions, help your analysis team more crisply analyze the experiment, and just in general, you'll be better set up to deliver projects that are going to be successful. And finally, you want to identify proxy metrics. It takes some time and effort, but you can use those proxy metrics to measure progress. It's much better than trying to have infer a spurious correlation with retention or do some sort of imaginary Excel math to prove impact that you haven't really proven. It's much quicker than a large-scale A/B test that even the largest companies in the world can't use. And it's also a much more rigorous process than simply looking at feature usage. Did people use this thing? And inferring from that point that it's success. It really strikes the balance between perfectly measuring through an A/B test, which is very hard to do, and just looking at feature usage, which really isn't enough. So that's it. Hope you can use these tips to deliver better, more impactful projects. Would love to hear what you think. Please do go ahead, tweet me, and enjoy the rest of the session.